backstage. You guys begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Well, hi, Mom, and I'm so glad you're in Ventura. This is going to be a special afternoon because I'm just really happy that we finally have the time to interview you and just to get it on tape. So, yesterday we celebrated your 88th birthday, and it was wonderful. So, I was wondering if you could just tell us how old you are. How old you are, anyway. How old you are,
Right.
and where you were born, and just a little bit about your early life. And
Okay. Well, first, it was a wonderful 88th birthday, and in the Japanese, the double-digit number birthdays are supposed to be very special. So, May 15th was my 88th birthday. And my full name is Teruko Shimamoto, my parents' last name, Newalder, my married name. And Janet is the middle daughter of 3 daughters that Herbert Newalder and I had. Right.
and the 2 other daughters' names are?
Cynthia Newalder and Jennifer Newalder. Yeah.
And we all have Japanese middle names.
Yes, we do.
Where did that tradition come from?
It came because when we had our first child, my parents said, "Oh, we have to have a middle Japanese name." So each child has a middle Japanese name: Cynthia Michiko, Janet Ayako, and Jennifer Emiko. Yeah. So.
I know that always made me feel very special. I think it also made my sisters feel special too.
Right.
So, and I know Jennifer carries on that tradition with her daughter.
Right.
So that's wonderful. So I'm just wondering, your early years in San Francisco before the bombing of Pearl Harbor, what do you remember of that? Where did you live? What was life like? Who did you live with?
Okay. So I lived, I know, on Gary Street somewhere. And it was we were 3 generations living in the same house, which is that in the basement. Well, first of all, when we first moved there, it was 2 families, meaning my father and his family, meaning my sister and my mother and my father. And then his older brother lived there, and he had 2 boys and a wife. And then there was a third brother, Frank, who lived in a single room. And when my mother was going to have her second child, she told my father, I take care of a lot of kids and have a lot of responsibility. I need some help. At that point, they decided to ask his parents. His parents lived in Fresno, or near Fresno, and were farmers. And so the grandmother and grandfather from Fresno came to live with us, and they lived in the basement. So it was 3 generations, and it worked pretty well. There was one problem, which added to the need to have the grandparents live there, which is that my uncle's wife ran off with somebody else and abandoned the 2 children, and
Wow.
therefore my mother needed help with these 2 boys.
Wow.
And so it was a 3 generation of Shimamotos lived under one roof for many years on Geary Street. And that's the only place I remember living. And I went to Raphael Weil Elementary School, somewhere within walking distance.
Was it mainly Japanese Americans that were at that school because it was close by and you lived in a Japanese area, or was it mixed?
It was mixed. It was mixed. Yeah, I don't think the majority were Japanese Americans,
Interesting.
right? But it was mixed. But it was close to Japantown or in Japantown.
Do you have memories of being sort of culturally Japanese? Were there textiles or Japanese dolls, or
Yeah, I
did you
had
with
to have
chopsticks?
Japanese-
Did you speak English,
Yeah.
Japanese? What was life like?
I did speak Japanese when I was little. The main caretaker was my mother, who spoke virtually no English. Yeah, because my mother, who was born in the United States in 1910, was sent to Japan to have a proper Japanese education for a girl.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
Kibe. That was the group
Right.
of people who were sent back to Japan to be cultured
Right.
and returned often more Japanese than.
She was very Japanese.
Than the immigrants.
Because she went from about age 5 until age 17. So she was very culturally Japanese. And so we spoke Japanese at that time. I did. And as I said, we lived near Japantown, and all my friends, or most of my friends, were Japanese. Right.
Great.
And I went to a Buddhist church in San Francisco, right?
The San Francisco Buddhist Church?
The San Francisco Buddhist church that my father was the architect of the San Francisco Buddhist church.
That's right.
Right.
We were there as a family too.
So brings my father, who was a very special man and continued to be a very special person for his entire life, which is that my father was born in 1904, and he came to the United States when he was about 13 years old. And he went to Bakersfield, I believe, high school. He played football in high school, and he was truly culturally biracial, bilingual. And he was a very unusual man for his generation, because most of the people who immigrated from Japan were farmers. But he went to American high school. He went to an architectural institute. He became an architect, and that was his profession when the war began. And I always knew that my father was very special, but that was one of the qualities, that he was educated in the United States. Yeah.
He achieved so much as an immigrant in such a short period of time. I know we've read some of his interviews that were transcribed, as well as autobiography or a biography that both Cynthia and Jennifer helped create with him.
Yeah.
And it was remarkable that he arrived in California really knowing nothing, and apparently one thing I do remember is that he was identified as being very good at football because he was very strong, right? Remember those legs, and kind of husky, and so being an athlete really helped ground him.
Right.
And he also, I think, had a teacher that was interested in him and
Yeah.
would tutor him in English.
I heard that story too.
Yeah, so he must have had just something that was very inviting to people. I mean, he
Yes.
must have been open or sweet or sincere, and wanted to learn and had curiosity. And
I think you experienced some of that, because he took you to some parties, right? And you could see that people were gravitated to my father, and so Janet experienced that firsthand. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
He had a very winning, welcoming personality, and he was a leader in the Japanese community.
Right. Also, in San Francisco, growing up, he was co-owner of the family business, right?
Right,
Shima Transfer.
Right.
I don't know if it was called that, but I think
That's Shima
okay,
Transfer.
Shima Transfer.
Company.
And so he was actually, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there was an incident with the FBI coming to the apartment, which was a part of the incredible reaction of the bombing in the entire, that shook, I mean, the nation as well as the Japanese American
Right.
community.
Yeah.
So is there, do you remember that incident, or either by memory or what you've been told about the FBI coming
Yeah.
to the apartment?
I have a memory, but I'm sure it's kind of a formed memory somehow. But my memory is that I was at the movies with my father, and I came out of the movies, and there were newsboys waving their news, extra, extra, Pearl Harbor bombed.
Oh.
And that's a very vivid memory, but I kind of think, I haven't looked up what time of day it was or anything like that, but I suspect it's just an image that's just in my mind. But that's where I remember that it was very scary when we walked out of the movies, and suddenly this bright light on a Sunday afternoon, and we are at war with Japan.
The world changed
Right, the
in
world
that
changed,
moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
and everything became very, very hushed in the house. I mean, actually, there was a lot of activity as well as hushed, and they had. We had to put dark curtains up at night because they had blackouts, so they were afraid of planes flying over. I mean, it doesn't seem realistic, but at the time, we did have blackouts. That I'm positive of.
Apparently, too, there
Yeah.
were Army reservists and policemen stationed on every corner in
Yeah.
the Japanese neighborhoods. That was something I
And there was a curfew. I think it was
heard
8
Grandpa
to
say
8,
in a recent interview
8 to 8 that
that I heard.
all Japanese and Japanese Americans had to be in their homes or be
Right,
home
the
by
curfew.
that time, right? So I think it was really. I don't have a memory of what it was like to go to school and things like that, but I think it was a very, very scary time, and it was a very. What I remember, one thing is, I was in some ways it was very special because my father was home.
Yeah.
He would be home. He wasn't out with meetings or whatever he did in the evenings. Yeah. But so that was, and he was a different man because we spent more time with him when this happened. Yeah.
Right.
So
It's interesting. You had the gift of time under
right.
extraordinarily
So that's one memory that was
horrible
very
circumstances.
different, that he was home.
And do you have memories of actually parting with your possessions or packing up? You were only, before assembling on the streets of San
Yeah.
Francisco, you were only
Yeah.
supposed to pack what you could carry.
You could carry,
So do
yeah.
you have any memories of that?
I don't have any memories, but one time when I was in a period of transition and living at home for maybe a couple of weeks with you guys, with the children, that I was really feeling kind of melancholy. And I wrote this little story about having my favorite doll, and I knew that I could. The regulations were that when we were going away, we could only take what we could carry. And this was a really big doll, life-size doll, and I knew I had to give her away. So I wrote the story of going up to my best friend from school, and I told her she would you take care of my doll, and it was really, really sad. Yeah, it was really
That's
sad.
really sad.
Right. And while it's a story, I'm sure things like that happen, that we had to give,
Absolutely.
special animals or dolls to our friends,
Yeah.
because what else could we do?
So I know Grandpa sold everything of the shipping company, pretty much dumped everything
Right.
at fire sale prices.
Yeah.
But were the household possessions, were they stored somewhere like the Buddhist church or?
Yes, some of the Buddhist churches did store, but when you think about how many thousands of people were being moved, because of the regulation, to out of fear that they just assumed that the Japanese Americans, Japanese people, even with their American citizens, that they couldn't trust the Japanese, right? So I think it was 904, right?
Executive order.
Executive order. And by that executive order, the entire West Coast, all people of Japanese origin or with origin were moved from the West Coast to relocation camps, they call them. Right.
And
So
first-
that happened in May of 1946, or 42.
42.
I'm
right.
sorry.
And
Yeah.
your family went to Tanforan.
Yes.
And families were kept together.
Families were kept
So
together.
certain
right.
regional areas were evacuated as a group.
Right.
And that,
So, yeah, the whole San Francisco area went to Tanforan. And after Tanforan, we went to the desert in Topaz, Utah. Right.
right. And Tanforan was a racetrack that
Right.
had very recently been used as a racetrack and very hastily
Right.
modified or
Right.
to accommodate all
Yeah,
the evacuees. But
Right.
interestingly enough, in the tape that I recently we listened to with Grandpa, he was commenting on how there was horse manure smeared on the stall walls and floors that they had to clean, and also that they were given a gunny sack, cotton sack, and they were told the alfalfa's over there. Go ahead and make your mattress.
Yeah, mattresses. Yeah.
Do you have any memories of that or more?
I mean, fortunately, we were in some kind of barrack or something, not in the forest stalls. But yeah, people did have to
Right.
live. Some people did live in horse stalls.
Right.
Yeah. So I do have a memory of being a couple of memories of Tanforan, which is when we first got there was only one place to eat, and there would just be these tremendous long lines for each meal time, where you might have to wait on for an hour and a half,
Wow.
because you wanted to be in line and get the food. And I think that their food was plentiful enough, but I think there was a lot of fear that everything has to be done and you have to be in line. So I
Right.
think there was we lined up for longer than we probably would have had to, but we were all afraid that there wouldn't be any food, things like that, right?
Well, and I imagine that sudden change of absolutely everything,
Yeah.
the breakdown of anything you knew to be normal must have been
Yeah.
incredibly traumatic,
Yeah, right.
and no one really knew.
No
Did
one
they
knew.
tell you you're going to be here for approximately 3 months, which
I
on
don't-
many
I
of
don't think
the
so. I don't think
many
so.
of the assembly centers, that was around
Right.
the maximum length people were,
Yeah.
I want to say, living there,
Right.
because the camps were not ready. Everything was so
Right.
hastily happens in such a quick
Yeah, so
fashion.
we went there in early May, and I think it was about September, October
Oh,
that
okay.
that
So,
we moved to a second camp, which was
Yeah.
we were told would be a permanent camp.
right. And what do you remember? Do you remember the journey from Tanforan in California to Delta, Utah, where the Topaz camp
I
is?
actually, that's one memory that I'm sure it's embellished or missing in a lot of ways, but yeah, I actually I wrote it down that it was an old train. It had like velvet covered cushions, and it didn't have air conditioning. I'm not sure a lot of things weren't air conditioned in 1942.
But you maybe remember it being hot?
It was very, very hot, and when we traveled, we had to have all the blinds down, and when there was a stop, it was always in remote areas, not at train stations or places that were very in populated areas, and then we had one stop. Well, I think there were a couple of stops, but where you got out of the train, and you could walk a few steps, and they said line up this way, and the soldiers were lined up with their guns, with their rifles, and my mother told me many, many years later, she said she thought they were lining us up, and because the soldiers were not looking outwards, they were facing us. The soldiers told us we had to stand all in a row, and each of them had their rifles.
Right.
My mother thought that they were going to shoot us.
Well, you were the face of the enemy.
Right. That's true.
I mean, why were you even there?
Right. So, yeah, we were in
Terrifying.
transport and was in sealed cars. Yeah.
So when you arrived at Topaz, Grandpa had one of the highest paying jobs in the camp. They needed him.
Yeah, right.
Can you talk about what his role was at Topaz and in the building of the camps?
Well, he was very unusual because he was an architect, and so he knew about construction, and they realized that he was an unusual person. Also, he was completely bilingual, which was very unusual for the people who were taken to camps were either spoke English as their main language or Japanese as their main language. There were very few people like him who were bilingual. Yeah, and because he had a professional degree in architecture, and the camp wasn't finished yet, and the buildings weren't finished. Things like the administration building or the hospital, they still had to be. They weren't completed yet. Most of the barracks were completed, so they could move the people from Tamparan to Topaz.
Start populating it.
Right.
I know some of the plumbing wasn't complete because in some of Grandpa's memoirs and writings, he writes that the bathrooms, not all the plumbing was complete, so it put a strain on the camp itself and made lines even longer.
Well, there were things like, I have a vague memory of every time I went to the bathroom, my mother would come with me because in some of the bathrooms, they didn't have doors.
Right.
And my mother would stand with a towel so that I would have some privacy, right, because otherwise I couldn't go.
Right.
It's too embarrassing.
And at bath time, too, in the bathhouse.
There were only about 3 or 4 stalls for baths.
Right. But those had partitions, right?
They had partitions, so they were, you had to stand in line so that you would have, you would get a chance to take a bath, right?
Interesting.
Right. And then they had communal showers, but a lot of people didn't want to have communal showers because they just weren't used to that.
Also, culturally, the Japanese are
very
quite
modest,
reserved and modest,
right.
so it was incredibly difficult.
Right, it was.
And Grandpa being the building, I want to say, manager and being a liaison between the internees and the administration, he had a car.
Yes,
and
because he had
to us some of the privilege of having the car.
Right. Yeah, because he was one of the very few people who could help the administration with all the building that still had to be completed. He had a car, and he would drive around to the various sites like the hospital or the administration building. Yeah, most of the barracks were finished, but these other community service types buildings were not finished until later. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right.
But that made him very, very special, which was great for us, or I was very proud that he was so special and he had a car. But it brought him into some conflict with older members. They weren't sure whether he was a spy, for the Americans or what the story was. And they were suspicious of him because he spoke English so well.
Yes.
Right.
And also, he faced a lot of adversity from the internees
Right, that's what I mean.
because he was chosen to recruit for the 442nd,
Oh,
the
really?
all-Japanese
Yeah.
American troop. And he, in his diplomatic way, said, "We are Americans, and I know you. We are
Right.
here. We're incarcerated, but we need your sons to serve and protect this country."
Yeah.
So he certainly he continued that role of
Right.
being that liaison and the
Right.
diplomat and kind of the great communicator
Right.
pretty much most of his life.
Yes.
And I would say for the greater good
Yeah.
of, even later in life as an architect.
Right. Right.
Right.
But I mean, for instance, there on the West Coast, there were anti-Asian laws. For instance, there was no pathway to citizenship for Asians. No pathway to citizenship. So he was here a long time, and he couldn't become a citizen.
Right.
Right. And there were a lot of restrictions, such as in the state of California, only people who were American citizens could buy land. So in my mother's family, they were farmers. So the parents couldn't buy land. But when the children were born, each time a child would be born, they would save their money and buy land. And with each child who was born, they would buy more land, and they became very prosperous
Yes.
farmers, raising lettuce and strawberries and things like that,
Right. And what year, can you tell us about the circumstances of Grandpa, how he got the job in New York and how he left camp early and your transition from
Right.
leaving camp to beginning a new life in Manhattan?
Okay, well, there was a period when it seemed that Japan would be defeated. Wouldn't be an invasion of the West Coast, and that were starting to get permission to leave camp. They couldn't go back west, but they could go back east and find jobs or go to college. So that's a lot of people left at that time, or join the military. That was another way to leave camp. So my father, was in the summer of 1944. He decided he would try to go to New York and see whether he could restart his career. And that's what he got permission to leave early. But as I say, by that point, a lot of people got permission to leave early. They wanted to go to college in the East, as long as it was East, or they would get jobs as nurses who were needed in the rest of the U.S., or farmers. So quite a few people left, in addition to all the boys, the men who signed up to be soldiers with the 442nd, which was a Japanese unit, and fought in Italy. So my cousin was with the 442nd.
Shig?
Shig,
Is that Shig?
And then Bill, one of my uncles, was in the military, but not in the 442nd. And then I had another uncle who was in what is it?
MIS,
Yeah,
Military Intelligence
right.
Services. That's
And
Frank.
he served in the Pacific,
Right.
because they sent him to language school, and he became proficient in Japanese, and interrogated Japanese prisoners of war.
Yeah. Talking with Frank, he would talk about invisible writing and like
Right.
urinating on something, which which revealed the code
Uh-huh,
and
right.
things like this. So,
Right. No, it's
yes,
supposed to
he
be.
was an
He was a
interesting
top secret
fellow.
kind of guy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, how old were you when you arrived in New York, and what do you remember about? Were you in junior high, or what grade?
No,
were you
I
in?
was in fourth grade.
Okay, fourth grade.
I was in fourth grade, and the second part of the last half of my fourth grade. So, it was first of all. I left CAB in January of 1945. It was at a time when everybody knew that victory for the U.S. was inevitable, but this war was still going on. But you could get permission to leave if there was somebody waiting for it. So my father had come to New York. He had gotten a job 6 months earlier and finally had enough money to have an apartment, and he sent for us. Right. And so we came by train from Topaz. And all I know is we got into the cab, and it was in January. The cab drove through Central Park, and it had snowed, and there was ice around. It was absolutely spectacular. And we just enjoyed the ride to this little apartment on 106th Street near Central Park West, where on the top floor, walk up, 4 flights of walk up, rear apartment, meaning we just had like an alley to look at, but it was our apartment.
Your own apartment.
Right.
And did you make friends easily? And
I did
what are your
make friends
memories
easy.
of
I went
junior
to
high?
PS 54 on 104th Street.
54.
So, and it was very integrated, meaning the Hispanics and blacks and white people, and then I came along. I think I was the first Asian,
Right.
but it was a very welcoming situation. So I remember 2 of my friends were Puerto Rican and a black girl. Yeah, were my
And were
best
you
friends.
told to say something about why you started at that school, or what the
well,
circumstance was?
Kids are curious. They say, where'd you come from? So I couldn't. There was no way I could explain how it came from a prison camp. I mean, there's no way. So I would say I came from San Francisco, where I was born and where I had lived. And as soon as I mentioned San Francisco, they said, San Francisco, that's in California. And their faces would light up, and they would start talking about California. And I didn't have to say anything more. Right. They accepted me as being this wonderful person from California. It was kind
Well,
of
that's
silly.
wonderful.
Yeah.
It sounds like I want to say a normal childhood.
Right. Things got much more
Yeah.
normal. Right.
And then your
Right.
junior high friends were lifelong friends.
Yeah,
right?
I still have 2 friends from junior high school and high school. Right.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And what were they like?
Well, first of all, they were Jewish, so and so my first contacts were with a lot of New York Jews, and so I wished I could be Jewish, because I was the only person, or one of 2 people in our group of friends who was not Jewish.
I see.
Right. So
Did they ever ask you about your cultural identity?
not really, no.
Interesting.
I think we were just we did a lot of New York things like go shopping, and when you got older, we went to Broadway shows. So I think it was $1.75, like the last row. But it was great. I mean, I had a wonderful.
Great. And did you speak Japanese at home, or what happened to sort of that
Well-
Japanese culture transitioning from camp to, I want to say, your new life in New York?
Okay, so my mother, who was raised in Japan and lived in Japantown, and then lived in camp with Japanese-speaking people all the time, she spoke very little English. I mean, she spoke it enough. I mean, my sister, my Japanese deteriorated, so I mean she understood a lot of mostly
Right.
everything that we said in English, but we forgot my mother learned English and we forgot the Japanese. Right, so that was a very hard thing for my parents, yeah. But actually, my father, when we first came to New York, my father actually said to us, "Your mother has to learn how to speak English, and so therefore we're going to speak English to her all the time." So she learned English, we forgot her Japanese, yeah.
I think that's not unusual in a way.
Right.
That the
yeah. That happens.
native
right,
language gets
right.
lost.
Yeah.
And so you grew up, and at some point you thought, what should I be when I grow up?
I don't know. Since the 4th grade, I always wanted to be a doctor.
Yes.
And
We
so
read
they
that
said-
report recently together.
I know. Yeah, Janet's going.
And what was it? What was it about the medical profession?
I don't know. It was just something like to be able to heal
Right.
people and make them well. Well, I mean, that's the first time I've thought of this. But it could be that I had a cousin who died at camp,
Oh,
Hiko Haru.
Hikuharu.
My cousin, with whom I was raised in California, had a congenital heart disease. Yeah, and of course in those days they didn't do surgery at a young age or older age to repair things like valves and other
Right.
malformations of the heart. So he was about 14 years old, and it was a big deal because really a young boy died at camp, and it was a very big funeral for him in the camp.
We have
yeah.
that incredible family photograph
Yeah.
of the very formal, and you're in white go-go
Right.
boots with Lily, your
Oh,
sister.
really?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I'll show it
Yeah,
to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it
Incredible.
was very, very sad. My cousin died. Yeah.
Another profession you were thinking of was to become an architect, like your father. And what
Oh yeah.
what
so
was his response to that?
Well, I said I want to become an architect, and he said, "No, that's no profession for a girl." Well, at the time, I mean, it was fewer than 2% of architects were women at that time. Right. And he didn't like the office atmosphere because he said, the men swear sometimes and they make jokes. Yeah, he didn't tell me what kind of jokes, but I got the
You
message.
got the message.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So he said, that's not a place for you. Right. Although that was part of my growing up my father, when he worked on Saturdays to make extra money, I think, he would say, come to the office with me, and that I would, do my homework in the architect's office, and he would be
Nice.
doing it. And the best part of that was that he would take me out to lunch,
Nice.
right, and I could get a sandwich.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good memory.
right.
And you used to also go to a Yankees game, right? Baseball games occasionally?
I only went once. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My sister was a big fan. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, she knew all the players, and yes, right.
And you eventually went to college. You started at Northwestern,
Yes.
but you ended up.
because I wanted to meet. I thought there was a Japanese community in Chicago. I
right.
went to Northwestern and said, I want to go to a good college and meet some Japanese boys.
Right.
And I thought they would be at Northwestern. But in fact, being a private college, I mean, and it was pretty expensive at that time. It was a good place, but I didn't meet any Japanese boys, and I never got to Chicago to find the Japanese community there.
Right.
So that was that.
But
was,
you were super involved there, almost too social, you said.
yes, right.
Played bridge and
bridge and football games, and Yeah, rah rah, and then I was part student government too, as a secretary of the class. Yeah,
And so your life changed.
yeah. I mean, it was it was
After
great.
that.
It was great, but
Right.
I made almost a lot. It's because I had a C in botany, and I said, if I stay here, I'm just gonna play and not get good grades. So I said, I gotta get out of here. Yeah.
And so your life changed when
Right.
you got a job at Pioneer Youth Camp.
Well, that was a job.
And you
right.
also transferred.
I transferred, yeah. I
And-
transferred to Antioch, which was,
Right.
I don't think it was the right school, but I did study there, and I
Right.
did pretty well. So I did get into medical school.
Right.
Right.
And that's how, through Antioch and Pioneer Youth Camp, where you worked, you met.
At her, my husband,
That's right.
who was, yeah, he's a wonderful man and person, wonderful person, yeah.
And you said it was just an incredible connection.
Yeah, we
like
had
you
a-
understood
we
each
had an
other.
incredible connection because
Mhm.
we had childhoods that were so strange that it would be hard to explain to anybody else. But I think we understood from the very beginning that we could talk to each other, and that we had a soulmate that had a similar, I mean, totally different experience, but similar in the sense of the dislocation and the confusion of childhood. Yeah, because Herb Newalder was this man I was married to for over 60 years. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a long time, but
That's a long
it was
time.
good. They were very, very good years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So I'm just wondering, too, you then, married and you had 2 children while you were in medical school. Is that right? You had both of us while you were in medical school?
during my, I had Cynthia during
First.
medical school, which was,
Okay.
which is a total. I don't recommend that people have children in medical school. It's really is too difficult. But I did have her in the second. I was on my way to the dean when I told my medical resident that I was going to the dean to take a leave of absence for a year because Cynthia had gotten sick and was in the hospital.
Right.
I was exhausted. I was still postpartum. And I said, I can't do this. I can't go to medical school and have a sick child. So I told my resident, who was a woman, that I'm dropping out of medical school, take a leave.
Mhm.
And she said, take a week off. I'm going to cover for you. That was such a gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it could have only happened with
Yeah,
another
that,
woman.
like,
Another woman.
So moving to hear
Right.
that.
Another woman who had a child.
Mhm.
He was about 6 years old. And yeah, so she just said, take a week off, I'll cover for you. And during that week, we got enough support from the parents, everything, and I finished my final year of medical school.
Amazing.
Right, yeah.
When you reflect on that experience, do you feel as if you've given a gift to someone in your life, or anything
Like, giving
that
a gift?
well of that support and the timing of the residents saying to you, you are
Yeah.
not going to withdraw.
Which, I mean, a gift was given to me that,
But I'm saying, as a recipient of that, and how it really changed your life, it allowed you, and probably because it was a women's college, and
Right.
because she was a woman.
right. Yeah,
So I'm just I'm just wondering,
it was,
in anyone you've mentored, younger doctors.
I mean, actually, no one has approached me in the way that I approached her. So, I mean,
It's a tough comparison
yeah, it's
that
a
I've
tough,
asked you.
It's very unusual.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I think one thing that comes to mind, though, is just the level of care and generosity and support you've given.
Oh, Janet.
I know,
Oh,
sorry.
gosh,
So many
Janet.
people in your lives.
Oh,
You've
Janet.
modeled that.
Yeah, well,
And so that, when I think of what that resident did, it really changed your life.
yeah. And it was a sad, very sad thing. I finally decided years later to look her up. And I did find her. And she told me, so we met at Lincoln Center.
Oh my goodness.
And she said to me, but I have to tell you, I've had some problems. And so I'll meet you at a certain point. And I met her. She had had a terrible accident, and so she had no memory of it.
Oh.
Yeah, but she said, that's the kind of thing I know I do.
Oh.
But she didn't remember it. Yeah, so it was
Oh.
really sad.
That is
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
But at least in your heart, you knew that.
Oh,
But yes,
but
you
yeah,
wanted
I think
to share that.
I
and
just
look
wanted
over
her to
at
know
her.
that she
Oh.
made such a big difference in my life. Yeah. Right.
That's a beautiful
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Something I've
Uh-huh.
shared actually with other
Yeah.
people, other
Right.
friends.
Because she absolutely didn't have to do that at all, to say I'll cover for
Right.
you for a week, because she was
Amazing.
doing my job and her job at the same time. Right.
Well, sometimes mothers stick together.
Right.
Maybe
so.
that was more the mother and her, less the resident.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Right. So just out of curiosity, I mean, when you think about your life and the level of persecution and dislocation and the blooming of your wonderful life and your children and everything you've given us and everything that's been earned and given to you, is there a takeaway from your experiences
Well, I
that
have,
you want to share that are like most paramount?
well, I think it's the people who have been part of my life that it wouldn't have been possible without them, meaning my parents. They never said, "Oh, you can't do this," or they would. Sometimes they were bewildered, like when I said to them, "I want to go to medical school." I mean, like, they really were bewildered. How can you do this? I said, well, I actually saved some money, and I said, if I get through the first year of medical school, would you help me after that? And they did, right.
So you proved yourself.
Right, yeah. So it was a lot of circumstances that, I mean, I could have gone off track somewhere, or several places, right.
And you chose psychiatry. And
Right.
do you think that is a choice you made because of your personal circumstances and
Well,
your interest in
I mean,
problem
I'm
solving,
sure. I'm
perhaps?
sure it has impact. I specifically chose the place I did my residency, Bronx Municipal Hospital, because I met somebody when your father and I were stationed in Germany.
Oh,
Yeah, so he was an obstetrician in the hospital in Germany. Yeah, so and one of his friends had just been drafted out of his residency, and he was eager to go back, and he loved it. So that's what little thoughts occurred to me, that this is something that I'm interested in. Yeah.
well, it certainly seemed to suit you well. For how many years have you been practicing?
Oh, please.
I think it's 50, 54,
Yeah,
something
something like that, right.
Yeah, that's really
Long time.
remarkable.
Yeah. So.
And do you think lessons were learned from the Japanese internment?
Um,
And if
Well,
so,
I
what are
think-
they?
I think it's like resilience, that wherever you are, just stick with it in a way that's consistent with good values. And I think a lot of that came from my parents too, because they had this spirit where, be fair, be honest, be true to yourself. I mean, there's, it's like kind of quaint in a way in this world, not right now, but they were kind of
Yeah.
basic principles of
Mhm.
trying to live a good life and be a decent person. Yeah, it's so, I feel kind of embarrassed to say these kinds of words because they're so basic, but I think that's it.
No, I think it's beautiful.
Right.
And in fact, I feel as if you were just telling me what you gave us
Yeah.
and what you modeled
Right.
all, a life during your lifetime.
Yeah, right.
So it's,
Well, I'm
it's-
so
I
happy.
mean, they're all beautiful
Yeah,
outcomes.
and well,
And I think our family was very lucky in that
right.
some families, maybe we could use the word damaged or really wounded, but for some reason,
Right.
the way your experience and even Dad's experience was conveyed to us was
Yeah.
never, I mean, we do know people died in the Holocaust on
Right.
Dad's side of the family,
Right.
but and we acknowledged, yes, the
Right.
horror of that, but as far as moving forward, that there was, the negativity wasn't going to affect the tragedy.
Right. Yeah, I think we both came through those difficult childhood years and circumstances, and they had an obvious made impression on us, but they didn't destroy us or
They
make
didn't
us
define,
yeah.
what they say,
Yeah.
didn't define us.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah. that.
Yeah.
So.
Is there anything else that you want to share, or any other reflections of either your
I am very happy
experiences?
that we're doing this.
I am
mean,
too.
yeah,
I'm so
because-
grateful. It's
Because
just-
in some ways we never had this kind of talk, and it's really wonderful
Mhm.
that, and it's kind of a surprise that it would take this.
Isn't that
to-
interesting?
It is very
And also,
interesting.
as you're preparing to move to California, and
Right.
as we're going through all of our one's life's belongings, from you, from Dad,
Yeah.
from his childhood,
Yeah.
from your childhood,
Right.
from Grandpa and Grandma's life and all of Grandpa's records and the family history. It's just beautiful to have this to sort of to add to it, as well as just have you to hear it.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we had this talk.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you
Yeah.
too for coming to see my show.
Oh yeah. And
And I'm glad you realized you inspired it all. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Jan, it was a privilege, really, honey. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you
Yeah.
have any other questions? Well, I love you forever. Thank
you.
you. Namaste.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. All right. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you.